Good morning, everybody. We'll have no etymology on my staff's names today like we had yesterday, which his whole family is calling up about. Wynn's whole family, wherever Wynn is. Okay, I want to thank my colleagues for being here. Now, yesterday, as you know, the President's counsel ended their defense of the President. Up until the very end, Mr. Sekulow kept making the argument that the case against the President lacked eyewitnesses, knowing full well that his client, the President, was blocking the very eyewitnesses he said the trial lacked. Knowing full well, he knew full well that one of the eyewitnesses, John Bolton, wrote that the President told him he wanted to continue the delay in military assistance to Ukraine until it announced the political investigations that he was seeking. Precisely the conduct charged in the first article of impeachment. Mr. Sekulow had the temerity to stand on the floor of the Senate and say you must acquit the President because there are no eyewitnesses to the conduct alleged by the House, and also that senators must not call eyewitnesses who could confirm it. Of course, Ambassador Sondland was an eyewitness. Mr. Mulvaney admitted the President held up the aid at a press conference. Nonetheless, the President's counsel said, you must have additional eyewitnesses, but you're not allowed to have them. Mr. Sekulow's view of a trial is downright Kafkaesque. Kafkaesque. Remember the book, The Trial? Okay. I think it's short. Is it a book or short? It's a novel. It's a short novel, not a long story. Okay. Now, frankly, the hypocrisy of Mr. Sekulow's argument was not lost on senators. I'm sure even Republicans sort of added this up, the hypocrisy. If anything, Sekulow's argument made the case for witnesses and documents even stronger. So inadvertently, he helped us. Now, I remain hopeful that 4 Republican senators will join us in supporting witnesses and documents in this trial. It's an uphill fight, as I've always said, but the public is on our side, and truth, above all, is on our side. And that's why we're still in the fight. That's why we're still in the ballpark. Now, I want to talk about 3 lines of pushback that they're using, the tremendous pressure of Trump/McConnell is using on Republican senators to try and get them to avoid the crucial Friday vote on witnesses and documents. The first is, well, it'll take too long. You've heard that one, and that's what they're using, number 1, in their own caucus. This debate over witnesses and documents began a week ago with Republicans saying, we're not against new evidence, we just want to consider it later. Now that the later is about to arrive, the argument has become, if we vote for witnesses, the trial will drag on too long. I predicted this. We said, you may remember this, a week and a half ago, they're going to say, let's wait, and then when we wait, they're going to say it took too long, we shouldn't have waited. Again, just double talk to avoid the truth. That's what they're doing. They're tying themselves in all kinds of pretzel knots to avoid the truth, but the American people know the truth. So, as I said, weeks ago, I said Democrats wanted an agreement on witnesses and documents up front, because if Republicans punted the decision till the end of the trial, they'd claim it would take too long, and Democrats were trying to drag it out, and lo and behold, that's just what's happening. But the Republican argument is wrong. It won't take too long. If my Republican colleagues vote with us to subpoena relevant witnesses and documents, there's no reason for a protracted trial. The 4 sets of documents we've requested have already been collected. They're sitting in boxes at the White House, the State Department, OMB, and the Pentagon. They're ours for the asking. Mr. Bolton has already said he'd testify. There's no reason for delays if the Senate summons Bolton, Mulvaney, Blair, and Duffy. In the Clinton trial, the 3 witnesses were deposed, each deposed in 1 day. If the U.S. Senate issues a bipartisan subpoena signed by the Chief Justice, any lawyer would advise their client to comply. If someone like Mr. Mulvaney still refused, we'd make a motion asking the Chief Justice to order Mulvaney to comply. We could settle any and all potential claims of executive privilege right on the Senate floor. So, We are not talking about a lengthy delay here. We're not going to be dilatory in any way. We have only asked for relevant evidence. It could be reviewed expeditiously. 4 witnesses, 4 sets of documents, the men who were in the room where it happened. No more, no less. That's reasonable. That's why the American people are so strongly in favor of witnesses and documents. Every day the number gets higher. There was another number that I saw on TV today, 75% are with us. My Republican colleagues only have to answer is this. This is the question my Republican colleagues have to answer. Is President Trump so insistent on immediate acquittal that the Senate trial cannot take 1 second longer to have a fair trial? Now, the second line of that's coming now from Senate Republicans is there's no reason to hear from witnesses because even if they prove the president did what he was accused of, it would not be impeachable because it's not a criminal offense. The Dershowitz argument. But the truth is, the argument made by Mr. Dershowitz is completely phony. Just about every legal expert disagrees with him completely. It's been widely discredited, even by the Republican witness in the House trial, Mr. Turley. The criminal code was not written to be the only check on presidential misconduct. No citizen can order the FBI to investigate their neighbor or ask a foreign power to interfere in our elections. Only the president can exercise these powers. If people can't hold a president accountable for abuses only he can commit, then the impeachment power is meaningless. Bear in mind that folks like Attorney General Barr argue that the president cannot be indicted even if the president did commit a criminal offense. By this line of thinking, if the president can't be indicted for criminal conduct, can't be impeached for non-criminal conduct, that would surely put the president above the law, and we'd cease being a democracy. The Founding Fathers were aware that there were terrible things that a president could do that don't violate the criminal law, and wanted to give the Congress a power to stop it. There are so many examples you could think of then, and so many examples now. That's the clear facts, that's the clear evidence. Mr. Dershowitz is an outlier, a total outlier. I mean, outlier. Okay. Finally, the third argument we hear from Republicans against witnesses and documents goes like this. The president will be acquitted no matter what. We know the result. Nothing could change our minds. Why even bother with a fair trial? Talk about being political. Talk about being cynical. I understand the pressure my Republican colleagues are under to wrap this up as fast as possible because President Trump demands it. But we, the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, have an obligation to seek the truth. A fair trial matters, whatever the outcome. Senator Murray. Oh, Senator, do you have to go somewhere?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Senator Murray. I have a front row seat, so to speak. I'm right on the floor by the House managers. I've sat in my seat, unlike other members, for this whole period of time. I've listened intently. I've used the skills that I had when I was an attorney, the 28 years that I've been in Congress and asking questions at hearings. And I've listened carefully to the president's team. And the one thing I haven't heard from them is a defense of the facts, What I haven't heard is why the president greenlighted aid to Ukraine 45 times between January of 2017 and June of 2019 to the tune of $1.5 billion. And as the ranking member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, there have to be certifications by the Department of State in conjunction with the Department of Defense that says that Ukraine is meeting its responsibilities and goals as it relates to dealing with its fight against corruption. 45 times $1.5 billion between January of 2017 17 and June of 2019, that money flowed. Those certifications were made. Now, the same period of time that the president's team would have you believe that the president suddenly had an interest in corruption, the issues which they raised, Burisma and the Bidens, preceded the $1.5 billion, preceded it. So at the end of the day, it's hard to look at the facts. Facts are pretty stubborn. It's hard to look at the facts and reconcile it with the president's defense. Or what I haven't heard is that his own national security officials thought that what he was doing was just fine. No. Or that he wasn't soliciting foreign interference in our elections for his own benefits. So when we start the questioning period today, I want to hear facts, not spin. I've been in enough trials to understand that a little bit of what you do is you have a flash over here, so you're not looking what the other hand is doing over here. And that's largely what I heard the president's defense team do. Create flashes over here so you weren't thinking about the essence, the core of the House manager's case, which is rather compelling. I want to hear that any evidence that the president genuinely cared about rooting out corruption. I want to show me the facts. Conflict against what I just told you about the 45 times and the $1.5 billion. That any evidence that this was official foreign policy. And through all the hearings we've ever had on Ukraine, I can tell you that I never heard that that was official foreign policy of the United States. And lastly, two last points. You know, it is amazing that you have a witness who provides essential information to the core of Article 1, abuse of power, who says, I am willing to come forward, and who ultimately we would have our colleagues not call for them to, or that person to come forward. Now, I've heard my colleagues, several of them say that they would like to see witnesses. Well, sometimes in this institution you don't get what you'd like to see happen, but they can by simply casting a vote for witnesses. They can make what they say they'd like to see happen, which would be an honest, fair, and transparent trial as a result of it. They can make John Bolton, they can make Mick Mulvaney, and the other critical witnesses, a very small universe, by the way, that we have asked for that we believe are critical at the end of the day. They can make that happen. And then the results of the trial will be fair, honest, and transparent, at least. And then lastly, as someone who has been an ardent believer in the checks and balances and the separate co-equal branch of government, and have done that even with administrations of my own party, if the President of the United States can deny all witnesses, all documents, as I consistently see outside of impeachment, impeachment has only personified what this administration has done. If they can drive the ability to have no witnesses for Congress to do oversight, no documents for Congress to do oversight, added to the fact that they believe that this administration believes it can go to war without the approval of Congress, and then take one of Congress's main roles, which is to provide money, and decide that they're going to transfer the money from defense essences to a wall, well, now guess what? The very essence of our democracy, the very essence of the checks and balances for the American people, they're eviscerated. They're gone. Our government has dramatically changed. To me, Article 2 is as compelling as Article 1. And finally, only Americans should decide American elections. When you have a foreign government, either because they want to or you elicit them, get involved in our elections, guess what? When Putin decides that he wants to get involved in our elections, it's not because he cares about America. He cares about his business and Russia. When Ukraine, even unwillingly, gets involved, it's not about doing what is right. It is about ultimately taking care of their business, their needs. When a foreign government is interfering in our elections, it's not about you, America. It's about them. Only Americans should decide American elections. Let me briefly, I understand some of the Spanish press is here, and I'm going to synthesize that. Tenemos un momento en este juicio donde es un imperativo de que actualmente haya testigos. Entre esos testigos es el embajador Bolton, el ex asesor de la seguridad nacional del presidente Trump. Un testigo que dice que quiere venir a testificar, que tiene información clave sobre el tema esencial y que actualmente la administración y algunos de nuestros colegas no queremos oír de ti. Bueno, si no queremos oír de ti es porque tienes que decir algo que va a perjudicar al presidente. Podemos inferir sin duda de que eso es un problema. Número 2, tenemos que ver por qué el presidente y la administración acordaron 45 veces durante casi 2 años 1.5 mil millones de dólares de asistencia a Ucrania, cuando actualmente tenía inquietudes de corrupción. No había ninguna inquietud de corrupción. Le diste 1.5 mil millones de dólares 45 veces en casi 2 años. Y por último, si el presidente de los Estados Unidos puede actualmente negarle al Congreso testigos, negarle documentos, pensar que puede declarar guerra en contra de otro país sin la aprobación del Congreso y también, actualmente transferir el dinero que el Congreso otorga para un propósito, ya no tenemos una democracia. Lo que tenemos es una dictadura.
Muchas gracias, senador. Senador Murray.
Well, thank you. I think it's important to take a minute and step back and look at the pivotal moment that we are now in. House managers provided an ironclad case. It was thorough, it was driven by the facts, and it was very compelling. And it painted a very chilling picture of something our founding fathers deeply feared, a president who demanded taxpayer dollars be held from a critical ally until he persuaded that ally to interfere in our upcoming election to benefit his campaign, who put his interests ahead of Americans' interests, and then tried to cover it up by blocking Congress from conducting oversight of the executive. The president's defense had their opportunity to paint a different picture. Instead, they offered a debunked conspiracy theory, complaints about the House of Representatives process, which the president refused to engage in, and irrelevant lectures. In short, the president's defense only made it harder to see how this president's actions could be defended at all. Meanwhile, more information continued to come out, further implicating the president and making it all the more urgent that we hear not just from John Bolton, but from other key advisors to the president who are involved in his actions in Ukraine, and that Congress be able to review key materials the president's own aides prepared. Now, we all sat in the same room, Democrat and Republican. We heard the same presentations. And in a few days, we're going to vote on whether the Senate will continue to seek the truth or try to help the president hide it. We'll vote on whether the Senate will have a trial that considers key witnesses and documents, the trial, by the way, that Americans want and deserve, or whether we're going to have a cover-up. To those who are on the fence about voting for witnesses and documents, I'd like to offer a reminder that it's a question of when, not if, more information comes out about this president's actions, especially given what we already know. Wouldn't you like to know more if you could before you vote on this? Wouldn't you like to get to as close as truth to as possible, regardless of what it is? As senators, we typically like to know as much as we can before we cast a vote. I don't know why this should be any different, especially given how absolutely critical this decision is to our nation's security, to our autonomy, and to our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Senator Kane.
Before there's a vote on conviction or acquittal, there's going to be a vote on whether this is a trial or a sham. That's what the vote's going to be likely on Friday. Is this a trial or is this a sham? For 17 years before I was in state politics, I tried cases. And I tried cases everywhere, from the traffic division of the Richmond General District Court, and I had cases in the U.S. Supreme Court and everywhere in between. I had trials that lasted an hour, and I had trials that lasted weeks. Not once in 17 years did I ever have a trial where there were not witnesses or documents. Not once. What I hope my colleagues will do is accord this trial on a subject so important the same level of gravity that you would get if you were in the traffic division of the Richmond General District Court. And of course, it's not just the lawyers who know this. Americans are often in courts, and Americans watch Law and Order or A Few Good Men or My Cousin Vinny or Judge Judy. Americans know what trials are, and they know what they're not. And if you don't allow documents and witnesses, it's not a trial. So that's a pretty important vote. Is it a trial or is it a sham? What is the consequence to the country if our colleagues vote that it should be a sham? Obviously, first, by not holding the president accountable, by not getting the documents that they've gathered, you're basically giving a green light to the president to do whatever the president wants. In this case, the evidence is that the president so wanted to hide the Ukraine scheme from Congress that they put the transcript in a secret server, and then they violated the Impoundment Control Act by not notifying Congress of the hold, and then they violated the Whistleblower Act by not timely sending to Congress evidence of the whistleblower. They wanted to hide it. And so the first consequence of a sham vote would be to say the president can do whatever the president wants. The second consequence is not about the president, it's about the Senate. It's about, it will send a message to the American public that you can't trust the Senate. The Senate said they would deliver impartial justice, and they didn't. But the last consequence, and this is an important one, and I go back to my time as a trial lawyer, there's a lot of people in this country who have real questions about whether our justice system delivers impartial justice. You see deep anxiety about that across this country. Does our justice system deliver impartial justice? Is it capable of delivering impartial justice? Or are there different systems? Is there a system for like regular everyday folks, and is there a different system for rich and powerful folks? A lot of people have deep, deep concerns about this. If they watch a trial in the United States Senate presided over by the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, a trial regarding the behavior of the most powerful person in this country, and they come to believe, oh, there's a different standard for a rich and powerful person. A rich and powerful person gets to hide all the evidence, hide all the witnesses, not be held accountable for the actual facts and evidence. It will confirm in many, many people the deep cynicism and anxiety they have about our system of justice. Let's stand for the proposition that we can still do justice in this country, and let's reject an effort to turn this solemn proceeding into a sham.
Thank you for my colleagues for their eloquent statements. Yes.
Senator Schumer, a member of your Democratic caucus, Joe Manchin, said today he believes Hunter Biden would be a relevant witness. What do you say to Senator Manchin?
Look, our goal, we want witnesses' documents in the room where it happened, to quote the Hamilton play and actually Bolton's book. The four witnesses we have suggested are eyewitness to what happened. The documents are eyewitness. Hunter Biden is irrelevant and a distraction. But beside that, it's not up to Joe Manchin. It's not up to any of us. The Republicans could call Hunter Biden today. They have the votes. Trump and McConnell could call for Hunter Biden today. They don't want to. They know it would turn things into a circus. I don't even know if they'd have the votes in their own Republican caucus for it. And it's a terrible argument for the president. Here, the House managers have argued that the president was willing to risk our national security and risk the sanctity of our elections to go after Joe Biden and his son. Now they're saying we even want to risk the solemnity of a trial in the Senate on impeachment to go after Hunter Biden and his son. It's irrelevant, it's a distraction, it's running away from the truth, and it's up to the Republicans, and solely the Republicans, to do it. We're not for it. Yes.
Lev Parnas is on Capitol Hill. He's actually in their office right now picking up his impeachment trial ticket. He seems to know quite a lot. Why don't you want to hear from him?
Well, we're looking at the four witnesses that we've asked for. Those are the ones who were in the room when it happened. Lev Parnas wasn't in the room where it happened, and so that's why we've asked him. His lawyer called us up and asked for tickets, like many New York constituents, and we said you can get tickets. We give them out to the New Yorkers who've asked. I'm not sure Parnas would be allowed in because of the electronics around his ankle. Yes.
Senator, Friday's vote, while lots of folks are talking about it as if it's a decision to call witnesses. It's only a vote to make it in order to
Correct.
debate and vote
Correct.
on other witnesses. Is there maybe too much focus on this one vote? Because even if the Senate were to vote for it to be in order to call witnesses, that doesn't mean anyone is going
Okay.
to get called after that.
Look, that was a contrivance of Mitch McConnell and maybe some of his colleagues. We wanted witnesses immediately. That could have moved things along quickly. And they came up with this because they didn't have the votes to shut down witnesses and documents then, so they had this kick the can down the road theory. If we get 4 votes, we'll then have to decide, we'll have votes on which witnesses and which documents are available, and they'll be decided by majority vote. But the first step is to get 4 votes just to even allow this to happen, and we are working as hard as we can to see that that happens. Yes?
Is it time for a closed-door session in the old Senate room to deal with the issue of witnesses?
Well, it doesn't, there's a provision in McConnell's resolution for what's called deliberations, which are closed, and they can be in the in the Senate chamber that we meet in, not the old Senate chamber. And we'll have to see, you know, our view is we want things to be as open as possible. Is there a moment when coming together and talking about it in closed session might help? Who knows? But our strong presumption is keep things open. Yes?
Senator Schumer, on this point of these Republican senators who have made the calculation that Trump's not going to be removed, we're not close to 67 votes to remove him, a lot of their colleagues urging them desperately, don't vote yes, don't have a can of worms, don't take up 2 or 3 more weeks. What's the upside for them to vote to allow this messy process to continue and then have their entire party mad at them, the president looking down at them Tuesday night, daggers into their eyes, saying, you know, you're the reason why this is still going on. What's the upside for them if they've made
2
the
words.
calculation-
I get your question. 2 words. Fair trial. Regardless of the outcome, there should be a fair trial. And it will inure, as both Tim and Patty alluded to, and Bob Menendez, it will inure to the Senate's benefit if we have a fair trial, whatever the outcome. They vote no, they're saying this is a sham. They're saying we don't want to hear the truth. What does that say to America about this body? Yes?
Most of the Republican senators who are up in 2020 are arguing against witnesses. How do you think that will affect their race and their reelection?
We're looking at the truth, and we're going to let the chips fall where they may.
So Senator Manchin's comment is really the first hint that a Democrat might not be quite on the same page as all of you. And I'm wondering, are you concerned that just like Republicans are worried that they may lose
No.
some of their swing state Republicans, that you may have to lose some?
We have had total unity on the issue that will be before us. It's not up to Joe Manchin whether to call Hunter Biden. It is up to Joe Manchin to cast a vote on whether we should have witnesses and documents. We are totally united and have been totally united for a month and continue to be. Yes. En español, sin duda.
Ahora que comienza la parte de preguntas, senador, ¿cuáles son las preguntas más importantes que tienes para ambos lados?
Por 16 horas, hoy y mañana, vamos a tener preguntas para los dos lados, a entender su caso y sus puntas. Para mí, quiero preguntar sobre las consecuencias del voto sobre evidencia y también el voto sobre conviction o acquittal, porque hay consecuencias en el futuro, pero especialmente sobre este asunto de, ¿es el proceso un juicio o basura? La consecuencia para el Senado y también para nuestro sistema de justicia es bien importante.
I just learned 2 new Spanish words, conviction, acquittal. You get the last question.
Picking up on Charles' question, what has your message been to some of those senators in your caucus who might be considering not voting to convict the president on 1 or 2 of the articles? Have you had any conversations?
No, the only message I have is listen to the arguments carefully and make your own decision of conscience. As I've said repeatedly, I think the President's counsels to the House counsels have made very strong arguments. I don't think the President's lawyers have rebutted them. But each person's going to make his or her own decision. That's how it ought to be in something as important as this. Thank you, everybody.